What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Jake from Citizen JV, and today we're doing a revisit on the Callisto Protocol. And the reason why I decided to do this is because I did currently make a video on this game not too long ago. I believe it was earlier this year, and I kind of just want to go back to this game. And what I will say is that this game is definitely a lot better on New Game Plus than on its first initial playthrough. Obviously, because New Game Plus is always going to be the medium to the staple of single-player games, and that's where I believe that's where the Callisto Protocol does a really good job with its replayability value. However, I think what I thoroughly think about the Callisto Protocol in general, it's still a good game. This game runs on the Unreal 4 engine. It's not any different from that of, like the Dead Space remake running on the Frostbite engine, but however, that's going to be a separate video, but I just want to put that a little bit of information out there as well. Now, another thing what I think what the Callisto Protocol does, other than what it previously shows, or what this game is really purely intentional for, and what I mean by that is the fact that this game does represent some characteristics and similarities to that of Dead Space. And to me, I feel like it's a really good thing, and that's why I said, I want to revisit this, because I felt like that in my first video that I did on this game, it was not what I really anticipated of doing, but I wanted to do it in the first place because of the fact that I really wanted to talk about this game in general in my first initial playthrough, and what I really thoroughly think about this game in general too as well. Now, like I said, this game does a really good job with its gameplay mechanics. I love the mechanics of its stealth systems. Metaphorically, in most games, stealth mechanics are not always going to be the best. But I think when it comes to the Callisto Protocol, this game does a really good job with its stealth. I mean, because metaphorically, to me, in my personal opinion, I really think that, when it comes to stealth mechanics in most games in general, whether if they're like single-player games or maybe some cooperative games, much like Ghost Recon Wildlands or Breakpoint, the Callisto Protocol does a really good job with its stealth. I really think I don't think it's the best, but it still has a good implementation to it, and that's why I believe that's where the Callisto Protocol really does a very unique way of setting a good prime example of what a good stealth system mechanics, specifically even in the Callisto Protocol or any other games for that matter, much like Splinter Cell, of course. But that's where I'm just trying to get my point across. Now, I think the Callisto Protocol it's still a great game. I mean, opposite of that, a lot of people still think that it's the weakest when it comes to that of a Dead Space clone. But however, I still think that this game really still holds true to its utmost of the genre itself, and where this game really somewhat maybe ties in or fits into this Dead Space universe. And I thoroughly believe that, because I believe that when it comes to the Dead Space games in particular, much like that of the remake, what I will say is that, the Dead Space remake did a fantastic job with its lighting and atmospheric adjustment, with that of, what it was able to do with the Frostbite engine. And the Frostbite engine, to my understanding, is very much hard to work with when it comes to being able to have Dead Space, much like the Dead Space remake, to be more streamlined and being able to implement the game a lot more fluential of, being it more of a non-linear and more open and no loading screens. That's what the Frostbite engine was able to do with the Dead Space remake. Now, I think when it comes to the Unreal 4 engine, however, in the Callisto Protocol, while I do believe that the Unreal 4 engine in the Callisto Protocol does represent and really gives it a good flavor of its core environments, much like, different types of biomes in the game, however, like Blackgate Prison or Iron Gate or something like that. Iron Gate Prison, whatever. I'm sorry for my little kerfuffle there. But anyways, more appropriately, I think that the Unreal Engine or Unreal Engine 4 does a really good job of showing what the Callisto Protocol is meant to do. It gives it a better, good volumetric lighting to its own unique way, and that's where I believe where the Unreal Engine 4, especially for the Callisto Protocol, does a magnanimous job when it comes to its lighting, the structure of it all, and the way how light can bounce off certain types of areas within the game, or even a certain type of corridor. Now, I was initially going to make a comparison video versus the Callisto Protocol against the Dead Space remake, but I decided not to do that, but I still might actually do it. So, point being is that, you know, while I did, however, enjoy the Callisto Protocol as a whole, it still has the combat is still very much challenging. It's very, very challenging, and it's supposed to be that way, even though it does play that much of a similar to a Dead Space game. I mean, I thoroughly believe that when it comes to a game like the Callisto Protocol versus the Dead Space remake, I just think when it comes to cathartic horror, to a certain degree, you know, or psychological or supernatural type of way, I think the Callisto Protocol really does a good job on that front. Now, when it comes to the Dead Space remake, you know I might be veering off topic, but I'm doing a little bit of comparison here because I feel like that when it comes to comparing from the Dead Space remake to that of the Callisto Protocol, they like I said, they both are similar games in its own type of regard, because they do play similarly, because you are playing different protagonists from the Callisto Protocol or Isaac Clarke in the Dead Space remake. It's just that, you know, there are some gameplay mechanics that are very similar, but what stands apart from with the Callisto Protocol, you are able to do stealth. And what I will say is that I think the stealth mechanics in the Callisto Protocol, it's good. But like I said, it's not as good as I want it to be, but it's still good in its own regard, because, you know, there are some sections within the game that will require you to do stealth. But overall, I want to go into the combat here real quick, though, too, because I think the combat, like I said, you know, it does play similar to that of Dead Space, obviously. But it's like I said, it's more challenging. And that's where I believe that's where this game really differentiates itself, other than it being a survival horror. And, you know, Dead Space Remake was like that, though, too, or even the original Dead Space trilogy. And that's where I feel like that it's going to be one of those things to where it's like, I think the Callisto Protocol would really be able to... I think it could have been a lot better in terms of its combat, but, you know, it's still fluid, it works very nicely, and this game actually ended up getting several patches during the course of after the first of this new year, and they did, like I said, they did implement New Game Plus, so that way you can play this game to your heart's content. But they were able to, like, fix certain things, much like to maybe the user interface, or that, you know, being able to reload your weapons a little bit quicker, and being able to inject health into Josh Duhamel's neck in this game much quicker as well. You're able to do that, so that's really nice. And what they also did, though, too, is like you are able to switch between your weapons very quickly than normal, because I think that's one of the things that I believe the Callisto Protocol did not do very well on its initial release, is that, you know, constantly having to negotiate through by, you know, switching to each different type of weapon that you want to use, or different type of utilization of destroying your enemies, or even the biophage, metaphorically. So that's a really good way to do that, though, too. I think they did a really good job with its updates for this game. Now, what I will put in here, though, too, is that I have not played the DLC. I heard the DLC is good, but it's not all that great at the same time. But, I mean, I do kind of want to play it eventually. I just don't know when. But like I say, you know, I still think that the Callisto Protocol still holds up. It still holds up, and I'm really hoping to see more games in the future, much like the Callisto Protocol, or maybe a sequel. I mean, I know for one thing for a fact is that this game did not sell very well, but overall, you know, there are people in this world, or gamers in this world, that actually did enjoy the Callisto Protocol. I, for one, am one of those gamers out there to where I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. Even though, like I said, this game is hard as balls to a certain degree, but however, I still think that this game still holds up to its utmost. So, that's all I have to say about that. But anyways, too much further ado, thank you for tuning in, greatly appreciated. But if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to put them in the comment section below. I'll be more than happy to reply back if and whenever possible. And you guys have a good rest of your night. Peace.
All systems operating within normal parameters. Wait for print to complete. Quality check verified. Choose an item. Activating print assembly. The UJC appreciates your productivity. Invalid. Inspect print before use. Complete.